The quarterback's main role on the football field is to pass the ball to the other player so that they can run with the ball, taking it as far as possible. But some quarterbacks have the tendency to be able to run it themselves. Oftentimes when the pocket collapses around these quarterbacks, they have the ability to use their dynamism and speed to get out of tough situations, turning impossible scenarios into touchdowns with ease. Tom Brady could never. Over the years, we've seen some great dual-threat quarterbacks that have taken the NFL by storm in the way that they are incredible to watch week by week. Today, we're looking at some of the greatest dual-threat quarterbacks in NFL history. This decision was admittedly one of the hardest. One could argue that stat-wise, Russell Wilson is easily the better quarterback, beating Young out in the categories of both rushing and passing yards. But you also have to take into consideration the fact that Russell Wilson's career wasn't nearly as inconsistent as Young's in terms of the two players' status as starters. Steve Young was drafted by the Buccaneers in 1985 and had a couple of lackluster seasons as their backup QB behind Steve DeBerg. Tampa Bay traded Young to the 49ers in 1987, where he again was the second-string quarterback behind Joe Montana. He'd have to wait 4 years for his first professional start in San Francisco after Montana's injury, and the rest is history. 33,124 passing yards and 4,239 rushing yards over the span of a career that only had 6 solid, consistent years is nothing to snicker at. Young also threw 6 touchdown passes in a blowout Super Bowl victory against the Chargers in 1995, and was named the league's most valuable player in 1992 as well as 1994. On top of this, in his years with the 49ers, Steve Young was playing in the midst of constant comparisons between himself and Joe Montana. He had to play with the pressure of knowing that nothing short of a Super Bowl would suffice for the San Francisco fans. Being able to balance their expectations on his shoulder, while also having to prove that he was good enough to replace Joe Montana, and still having the insane Hall of Fame career that he did, is something that has to be acknowledged. For this reason, I place Steve Young on top of Russell Wilson. One could argue that Young had better teams to work with and a cushioning defense to play around, but the stats speak for themselves, and the magnitude of accomplishments that Young was able to rack up in such a short span of time is enough to give him the number 3 spot on this list. Up next, we have the legendary Fran Tarkenton. In his 18 years in the league, Tarkenton sure did leave a mark in terms of the way that he changed the game altogether. Tarkenton is often remembered as the pioneer of rushing quarterbacks, and at the time of his retirement, he held almost every significant QB record there was. Paired up with the Bud Grant-led Minnesota offense, Tarkenton did amazing things and proved to be a revolutionary figure in the league's transition to a more modern style of football. The key factor that puts him above the likes of quarterbacks like Steve Young in the category of dual-threat quarterbacks is his longevity. Over the course of his 18-year career, 13 of those years having been with the Vikings and 5 with the Giants, Tarkenton managed to pass for 47,003 yards and rush for 3,674 yards. This of course does not seem like much to the modern NFL viewer, but one has to remember that back in the 60s and 70s, quarterbacks were more suited to their conventional roles on the football field, and weren't very keen on attempting to break the already contextualized mandates of the quarterback position. In addition to his Cam Newton-esque stat line, Tarkenton ably racked up multiple individual accomplishments and recognitions, including 3 Super Bowl appearances, 9 Pro Bowl selections, a Hall of Fame induction in 1986, and get this, an MVP award in 1975, Offensive Player of the Year award in 1975, and a first-team All-Pro selection in 1975. Fran Tarkenton is upheld as the father of the dual-threat quarterback position, and in my opinion, this is for very good reason. Being a trailblazer of your era and completely changing the league's perception of how a position is supposed to be played is a feat to behold, and the way that he cemented his legacy as the father of the style that this very video aims to speak about, I just had to put him at least number 2 on the list. So it looks like this list was a pretty hard one to crack. I mean, if the very man who popularized dual-threat quarterbacking only comes in second place, then first place must be reserved for someone who is an absolute legend of the style. Someone so dynamic that opposing defenses knew the play was never truly over until it was over. Well, you probably already know who I'm talking about, assuming you've read the chapter name, but allow me to introduce the greatest rushing quarterback of all time, Daniel Jones. Just kidding, it's Nathan Peterman. Okay, fine, it's Michael Vick. In addition to having one of the coolest names in American sports, Michael Vick is also widely considered the greatest running quarterback to ever play football. I mean, sure, he likes dogs a little too much, but he makes up for that with 22,464 passing yards and 6,109 rushing yards in just 12 active seasons. Most people who watched football in the era of Michael Vick would know that he had a cannon for an arm, and oftentimes when the situation couldn't be solved with a calm pass or a gunslinging attitude, Vick would use the best of his abilities to keep the play alive using his legs. Time and time again, Vick would bring his teams, the Falcons and the Eagles, out of awry situations using his speed, balance, and strength as a quarterback, ripping out incredible run after incredible run, and virtually securing a spot as one of the NFL's brightest human highlight reels. Even after a huge dogfighting scandal that forced Vick to lose his spot as the Falcons' starting quarterback, he came back without a scratch in 2009 with the Eagles and won the Comeback Player of the Year award that same season. Despite never making it to a Super Bowl, Vick has collected 4 Pro Bowl selections across his 12 active years in the league. His plays are all definitely in the echelon of NFL films, and some for posterity alone. And while his career might not be worthy of the Hall of Fame, that doesn't take away anything from his status in the minds of NFL fans as the greatest dual-threat quarterback of all time. So those are the best rushing quarterbacks in the league's history. I tried my best to look past the pre-merger and post-merger eras, and those are the players that I came up with. But there are some players, both retired and currently active, that are worth a mention too. Like Cam Newton, the quarterback that took the Carolina Panthers to Super Bowl 50, and has the second most rushing yards for any quarterback in NFL history behind only Michael Vick himself. Another insane statistic about Newton is the fact that he has 75 rushing touchdowns overall in his career, a record that I can't see being broken for a while. Russell Wilson could also be a top contender for the mantle of greatest rushing quarterback if he finds himself able to add on to the 4.7k rushing yards he already has in his career. Lamar Jackson is tough to miss as well, and this might be an unpopular opinion, but Lamar Jackson has the potential to beat Michael Vick out for the title of greatest rushing quarterback if he stays healthy. In just 3 completed active seasons as a Raven, Jackson has jumped to 4th place in the all-time rushing standings despite having only played less than half of all the games of the quarterbacks on top of him. Randall Cunningham is worth a shout out as well, having quite the aptitude for scrambling in and out of the pocket. Over the years, NFL history has blessed us with these great quarterbacks, and even if some of them might not reach the pinnacle of football or rack up the awards to the magnitude of their expectations, they're the players that make the game fun to watch. They were the people that made us pay for ESPN to see Michael Vick run for his life on Monday Night Football. They were the QBs that helped us see that the game is just more fun when Lamar Jackson is rendering the Titans' pass rush ineffective on wildcard weekend. And they were the quarterbacks that revolutionized the game as we know it in its contemporary format. Because at the end of a long, hard day, the one thing any NFL fan would love to sit down and do is watch defenses getting torn apart by the likes of Steve Young, Fran Tarkenton, and of course, Daniel Jones.